Total Chaos dropped out of nowhere, shadow dropped during the Xbox partner preview, and honestly, that kind of strategy always makes me a little bit nervous. Like when the studio is confident in their product, they usually want you to know about it a couple months ahead of time. But when something just drops one day almost with no warning, that can go either way. So I went in with my expectations somewhere in the middle. Now that I spent some serious time wandering through Fort Oasis, getting lost in pitch black hallways, and having monsters absolutely wreck me while I fumbled through my inventory for a bandage, I can tell you exactly what this game does right and wrong, and whether it's worth your hard-earned cash. Let me start by saying this: the game completely caught me off guard, not in a bad way either. Total Chaos is a survival horror title developed by Trigger Happy Interactive and published by APOG Entertainment. If that developer name sounds familiar, that's because they're the same team behind Turbo Overkill, that wild boomer shooter that came out in 2023. So going from that fast-paced action-heavy shooter to a slow-burn psychological horror game is a pretty dramatic shift, but it makes more sense when you understand the history here. Before we dive into what makes this game tick, I want to address the elephant in the room, the moment-to-moment gameplay, because that's what you're really here for, right? You want to know if this game actually plays well or if it's just atmosphere with no substance, and I can tell you it's a bit of both, but mostly in a good way. Combat in Total is clunky, and I mean that in the most intentional way possible. You're not playing special forces operative or a trained soldier. You're a coastal guard who washed up on a nightmare island with nothing but your wits and whatever rusty pipe you can scavenge from the environment. The melee combat feels heavy and deliberate. You got your light attacks, heavy attacks that drain stamina, and that's absolutely essential for staying alive. There's also a system that when you nail it, it feels incredibly satisfying. You time it right, the enemy staggers, and you get the small window to unleash damage before backing off. It's that dance of attacking and retreating, watching your stamina bar, managing your health, and trying not to get surrounded that keep things intense. But here's where it gets interesting and a little bit frustrating. Weapons break a lot. That pickaxe that you found at the beginning of the game, don't get too attached to it. Every weapon has a durability meter, and using it chip away at that meter until usually the thing just falls apart in your hands. This forces you to constantly scavenge for materials, find workbenches, and craft new weapons or repair existing ones. It adds a layer of resource management that survival horror fans will appreciate, but it can also feel punishing when you're in the middle of a fight and you're suddenly defenseless. The crafting system itself is pretty straightforward once you understand how it works. You find components scattered around the environments, things like wooden poles, metal scraps, and glass shards, tape, glue, whatever you can get your hands on. Then you combine them at the workbench to create weapons like shivs, makeshift axes, sledgehammers, and eventually firearms. The guns are really rare though, and ammo is even rarer. So for most of the game, especially the first 3 chapters or so, you're gonna be relying heavily on melee combat. When you do get your hands on a shotgun or a pistol, it feels like a genuine reward, not something the game is just gonna hand to you. But now let me talk about something that genuinely impressed me. The sound design in Total Chaos is exceptional. I'm not exaggerating when I say this might be some of the best audio work that I've experienced in a horror game this year. Every creak of the floorboard, every distant metallic clang, every wet clinch of an enemy getting closer, it all works together to create this constant sense of unease. You never feel safe, even in quiet moments when nothing is happening. The ambient noise keeps you on edge. There's always something rattling around outside of your field of vision, something breathing in the darkness. And speaking of audio, they got Akira Yamaoka to contribute to the soundtrack. The Akira Yamaoka, the composer behind Silent Hill series. He created an original theme called the Catharsis, especially for this game, and you can hear his influence woven throughout the experience. It's that perfect blend of industrial noise, sadness, and unsettling ambience that horror fans will immediately recognize. The rest of the soundtrack is handled by the original mod composers, Jason Dagenais and William Bradgell, along with Apogee's music team, and they all did a fantastic job maintaining that oppressive atmosphere. But the atmosphere alone doesn't make it a great game. You need good level design too, and this is where Total Chaos becomes a bit of a mixed bag. The environments are genuinely gorgeous in a grotesque kind of way. Fort Oasis looks like it used to be a real place before everything went wrong. You got decaying apartment blocks, abandoned factories, underground prisons, flooded sewers, and twisted fortress that shouldn't exist. The visual fidelity is impressive here, especially considering that this game started life as a Doom 2 mod back in 2018. The Unreal Engine 5 rebuild really elevated everything. Textures look grimy and detailed. Lighting creates these pockets of absolute darkness that your lighting barely cuts through. And the environmental storytelling is generally compelling. However, However, the level design itself can be a little frustrating. These areas are massive and labyrinth. There's no map. Let me repeat that because it's important. There is no map in this game. You have to learn the layout through exploration and memory. Some players are going to love this old school approach. It forces you to pay attention, take mental notes, and really engage with the space. But other players, myself included, at certain points are going to find themselves wandering in circles, desperately looking for one switch or that one key they miss while enemies respawn, and chasing them through pitch black corridors. The game loves its switches and keys, and I mean it loves them. There's these sections where I had to find 5 different switches scattered across the zone, flip them in the right sequence, all while being hunted by enemies that could kill me in a few hits. It's that kind of design philosophy that feels much rooted in the older survival games, that kind of stuff that you see in early Silent Hill or Resident Evil titles. Whether that's a positive or a negative really depends on your personal taste or patient level. Let me talk about the enemies for a second, because the creature design in this game deserves some recognition. The common fodder enemies, these zombie-like creatures called brutes, aren't particularly scary after your first few encounters. They shamble towards you, they attack, they dodge, then they counter. Standard stuff, but it's the special enemies and the set pieces and encounters where total chaos really shines. Without spoiling too much, there are these creatures in the game that you just cannot kill, at least not when you first encounter them. You have to outsmart them, avoid them, and learn their behaviors. There's this one enemy type that can only detect you when you're using light, so you are forced to navigate through complete darkness while things stalk you in the area. Another enemy requires you to maintain eye contact, or it gets closer when you look away. These moments create genuine tension and memorable scares. The boss encounters and unique enemy introductions are handled very well. The game does a good job of making each new threat feel significant. You learn about them through the environment, through journal entries, and through the mysterious voice on your walkie-talkie before you actually have to face them. It builds anticipation and dread in a way that a lot of modern horror games forget to do. And that's right, the voice on the radio. Let me address the story, because I know some of you care about the narrative in horror games while others just wants to be scared. Total Chaos tells the story primarily through environmental details, collectible documents. You piece together what happened to Fort Oasis through journals, notes, newspaper clippings, and the gradual revelations from your radio contact. It's a slow burn approach that rewards players who take time to explore and read everything they find. The core narrative follows your character, a Coast Guard who received a distress signal from a mysterious boat back in 1972. You try to respond to the call, but a massive storm capsizes your vessel and you wake up on the shores of Fort Oasis. What was once a thriving coastal mining community has been completely abandoned. Something terrible happened here, and as you delve deeper into the island, you start to question not just what happened to the residents, but your own role in everything. The game deals heavily with themes of psychological trauma, mental health, guilt, and the blurred lines between reality and madness. Now, I'll be honest with you, the story hits some familiar beats. The unreliable narrative angle, was it real or was it just all in their head? The tragic backstory slowly revealed through flashbacks and hallucination. If you played a lot of psychological horror games, some of this might feel like territory you've covered before, but the execution is solid even if it's not particularly original, and there's multiple endings depending on your action throughout the game. And there are multiple endings depending on your actions throughout the game, which adds some replay value if you want to see the full picture. Speaking of replay value, let me talk about the length of the content. Total Chaos spans about 9 chapters, and my playthrough took around 15 to 20 hours depending on how much I explored and how many times I got lost. Some reviews are reporting longer play times, especially for those first time players who aren't rushing through. That's a substantial amount of content for a game around $25. The pacing is generally good as well, with the middle chapters feeling the strongest and the final 2 chapters settling into a more predictable rhythm. There's also a survivalist difficulty mode for players who want even more punishing experience. On this mode, resources are scarcer, enemies hit harder, and the survival mechanics become even more demanding. If you're the type of person who thinks games like Resident Evil hard mode are too easy, survivalist might be your jam. For everyone else, the standard difficulty provides a satisfying challenge without being overwhelming. So alright, let me address some issues, because no game is perfect, and I want to give you my honest assessment. The PS5 version, which I spent most of my time with, has the most notable problems. First and most obvious, there's no DualSense features. The haptic feedback and adaptive triggers that make the PS5 controller special, completely unused here. In a game where the atmosphere is everything, having the most immersive control features would have added so much more. Feeling resistance when you swing a heavy weapon, subtle vibrations when something is stalking you, that kind of stuff could have really elevated the experience significantly. It's a missed opportunity here. The text size is also problematic on console. Everything is written really small with no option to adjust the HUD or the text size. If you're playing on the TV from a couch, you're going to find yourself squinting at a journal entry and some item descriptions. It's a strange oversight that could have been caught before the release. Performance is mostly solid, with occasional frame drops that never completely derailed the experience, but were noticeable during busy combat encounters. Nothing game breaking, but not completely smooth either. The lack of performance options on console is worth mentioning as well. You get what you get with no ability to prioritize frame rate over visual fidelity. The inventory system is another pain point as well. Navigating through your bag on a controller is a pain in the ass. You're managing your weight limits, durability, hunger, thirst, radiation, bleeding, and stamina all at once. The UI works fine with the mouse, but on controller there were multiple times where I had to retreat from combat just to fumble through menus and find the right item to use. It's not a deal breaker, but it adds friction to an experience that could have been more streamlined for quality of life. The darkness is also worth discussing. Even after cranking up the brightness settings, there are sections where I cannot see where I was going. The lighter helps somewhat, but the range is limited and the enemies can detect you when you're using it. There's clearly some intentional design choice to enhance the horror atmosphere, but there's a thin line between intense darkness and just frustrating blindness, and Total Chaos occasionally crosses that line. But here's the thing, even with all these issues, I kept coming back. There's something generally compelling about exploring Fort Oasis. The atmosphere is so thick you can cut it with one of the game's breakable knives. When the game works, it works more often than it doesn't, and it creates this oppressive sense of dread that stays with you even after you put down the controller. And for context, you should know that Total Chaos has an interesting origin story. The game started as a total conversion mod for Doom 2 way back in 2018. A guy named Sam Pebble, going by the name Wadaholic, spent years creating this massive horror experience on the Doom engine. The mod won an award, which is basically the Oscars for Doom modding, and it became his favorite among horror fans and Doom enthusiasts. Pebble went on to work in Hollywood doing visual effects for movies like Avatar, The Hobbit, Rise of Planet of the Apes. All that experience came together in the standalone remake. Understanding that history helps contextualize some of the game's design decisions. The labyrinth level layouts, the hunting, and the resource scarcity all make sense when you realize that this is essentially a modernized version of the classic survival horror while pushing the Doom engine to its absolute limits. Some of that old school DNA survived the transition to Unreal Engine for better and for worse. Now let me talk about who this game is actually for, because I think that's important. If you're a survival purist who missed the old days when games didn't hold your hand, when resources were generally scarce, when getting lost was part of the experience, Total Chaos is going to feel like a love letter written specifically for you. This game doesn't care about your comfort. It wants you to suffer, to struggle, to earn every inch of progress. If you're someone who gets frustrated easily, who prefers clear objective and waypoints, who wants combat to feel smooth and responses, you might bounce off of this pretty hard. The clunkiness of the game is intentional clunkiness is still clunkiness. The maze-like levels are a feature, not a bug, but these features can still be annoying when you've been wandering the same hallways for 30 minutes. I fall somewhere in the middle. I appreciate what Total Chaos was trying to do, even when I was cursing at my screen. The highs are generally high. Those set pieces moments, those enemy introductions, that atmosphere, the sound design, they all combine to create something memorable. The lows are frustrating, but they never made me want to quit entirely. I pushed through because I wanted to see what was deeper in Fort Oasis, what secrets the islands were hiding, what the truth behind everything actually was. And let me give you my final honest thoughts. Total Chaos is not a perfect game. The inventory management can be tedious, the darkness is sometimes excessive, the console version is missing features that it should have had, and the level design will frustrate as often as it impressionates, and the level design will piss you off as much as it'll impress you. But underneath all those rough edges is a generally compelling survival horror experience that earns its place in the genre. For $25, you're getting around 15 to 20 hours of content, excellent audio design, memorable enemy encounters, and that atmosphere that most AAA horror games would kill to achieve. The fact that this is all started from Doom 2 makes it even more impressive. Sam Pebble and the team at Trigger Happy Interactive clearly poured their hearts into this project, and that passion shows in every grimy texture and every unsettling audio cue. If you're on the fence about this game, it is available on Xbox Gaming Pass, which is probably your best way to try it out without fully committing. If you're a horror fan that isn't on Game Pass, I say it's worth the purchase, especially if you go into it knowing what to expect. Just maybe play it on PC if you have that option, since the mouse and keyboard controls seem better suited for the inventory heavy gameplay. Total Chaos isn't going to be converting anyone who doesn't already enjoy survival horror, but for those of us who do love the genre, who do appreciate what makes feel vulnerable and afraid, it's one of those standout releases of 2025. Not despite its rough edges, but sometimes because of them. There's an authenticity to this experience that feels rare in modern gaming. It's not trying to appeal to everyone, and that focus helps succeed at what it's actually trying to do. So yeah, everybody, that's Total Chaos, a messy, oppressive, sometimes frustrating, but often terrifying journey through an island that makes you question everything. If that sounds like your kind of nightmare, welcome to Fort Oasis. Just remember to save often, manage your resources carefully, and maybe leave a light on when you're done playing. Alright everyone, that's going to wrap it up for this review. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to see more honest gaming coverage, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you don't miss anything. I'm going to be over on Twitch as Andre the Alpha, streaming games just like this, so if you want to come hang out, watch me get scared in real time, come through and drop a what's up. Drop a comment below letting me know if you tried Total Chaos yet and what you thought about it. Did you love it? Did the difficulty make you rage quit? I want to hear your experiences. As always, thank you for watching, thank you for supporting the channel, and I'll catch you in the next one. And remember to stay safe, stay smart, and stay alpha out there.